The night terrors came back. Only this time they were stronger. 2 words even to scare the most red-blooded Welshman. Semi-final. My friends always gave me the same answer.
It's because you're shit, right? It's because you're shit. It was a forward pass.
How is it that Wales, the proudest and most successful rugby nation in the universe, has never reached a World Cup final? Hello and welcome back to Rugby This Evening. Coming at you today, a Wednesday from here, the coldest place on earth. I'm shivering like my desk, my tie rosettes. Yes, this week is semi-finals week, which can only mean one thing. We're going to look back at everything that happened before the semi-finals week. What's important about the semi-finals is that all 4 teams get classified, unlike the other teams in the competition. So what we're going to do now is look back at the past teams that have already been knocked out and classify the non-semi-finalists from 5th to 20th. Yes. So, many of you will remember that earlier in the tournament I moaned about the lack of full classification using Italy as an example on an attractive blue background. So, what would have happened in this World Cup if all teams kept playing in order to get a final placing? Well, let's look now. So obviously each pool produced 2 teams to go through to the quarterfinals. But what if there was a secondary quarterfinal? Let's call that the plate quarterfinal for now, featuring the 3rd and 4th teams in the pool. These quarterfinals would consist of Scotland versus Namibia, Fiji versus Tonga, Italy versus Samoa, and Argentina versus Georgia. Some pretty one-sided games there. Then we would get all the semi-finals hypothetically held this weekend, which would feature, of course, the first semi-finals that are actually happening, New Zealand versus England, Wales versus South Africa, but also the, let's call them the Shield semi-finals, featuring the losers of the quarterfinals last weekend. So we'd have Japan versus France and Ireland versus Australia. And then the winners of the quarterfinals, the hypothetical quarterfinals we just saw, so we'd have Scotland versus Fiji, Italy versus Argentina in these plate semi-finals. Then let's go one further to the losers of these hypothetical quarterfinals. Let's call that the bowl semi-finals. Namibia versus Tonga, Samoa versus Georgia. And then finally, we'd bring back the 5th place teams in the pool to play in their own, let's call that the spoon semi-finals, with Russia versus Uruguay and Canada versus the United States. Imagine that. Imagine Canada getting to play the United States in a World Cup. They're such fierce rivals outside of the tournament. It would be great if they could play in this kind of situation. And this would set up on the final weekend or in the final week a huge list of 10 games to determine every single place in the tournament. So of course we'd have the final, whoever that's going to be, and the 3rd place playoff. But then we'd have playoffs all the way down. So let's have a look at them now. At the very bottom, Russia versus Canada. Let's give that to Russia. Uruguay versus USA. I think Uruguay to take that because of a certain fly half whose name I can't quite remember. And then up there a little bit further, for 15th, I'd say Samoa to beat Namibia. For 13th, let's go Tonga beating Georgia. Georgia showed certain vulnerabilities, certainly in the first half against Wales, in the full match against Fiji. Fiji would probably beat Italy though, because Italy was so poor against South Africa. Fiji also impressed against Australia and Wales. Scotland versus Argentina, definitely Argentina there. They've been much better than the Scots, apart from that match in England when they only had 14 men. And then up into the quarterfinalists, France, Ireland. Let's give that to the French because the Irish really did capitulate and France definitely deserved to be in the semi-final, but more on that later. And then let's say Japan to beat Australia. So that gives us a full list of where the teams would end up from 5 down to 20, and of course we will know 1 to 4 because of the final and the 3rd place playoff. So this has been the 2019 Rugby This Evening full classification. For this segment, which had such a long name, I've forgotten it already. So there we go then, that was that segment. But before we go and look forward to this weekend's semi-finals, we are going to check in with Bear Grylls. Now, last time the ball started talking, and I'm assured by Bear that it's not because I had too many tie rosettes. I quote, he said, "You're just as sane as I am. I'd like to poll you and know what the opposite of reassuring is. Vote up there. But let's see what's going on. Bear, what's happening today?
Oh, I'm not Bear.
What do you mean you're not Bear?
Well, do I sound like Bear?
Well, actually, no.
There you go then.
What happened?
It all started this morning when I woke up. I'm you, which means I'm you and you're me. You're me, so together we're each other, and that's weird. I don't know why I need to do this.
You need to go to school so you can fit in.
Why?
Because you do.
Okay. We need to make sure we blend in at school. We also need to make sure we can find my parents before midnight. Otherwise, our bodies will swap back and I will not be able to find my parents again. Oh, look, there's school.
I'm a teacher. You cannot come to school.
Why?
Because you are a 52-year-old man.
But I have a woman's voice.
That makes it worse.
Joke's on you, I'm a rugby ball.
Unfortunately, we couldn't enter the educational facility, but we are still going to try and find Gilbert's parents in the near future.
I do sure like having arms.
What's wrong?
I just wish I could find my parents, you know. This is the last chance I'm gonna get.
Your parents are dead.
What?
I lied. They're over there.
Mother? Father?
It's just a photograph.
Yeah, I know.
Will you help me find them?
Yeah.
I'll help you find them.
We're back!
We're back!
Thanks, Bear. Go get him. I'm really proud of you. You've raised you well. Now then, let's look at the semi-finals coming up this weekend. Now, they're a lot harder to predict than the quarterfinals. This might sound obvious, but let's look at the stats. For the quarters, I used the last game between the teams, the win percentage over the last 4 years, and whether or not they were the pool winners to determine whether or not they were likely to progress to the semi-finals. That gave us a pretty good probability. However, when it comes to the semis, it's not quite so simple. All of these stats give around a 50-50 chance. And even the last game between the two teams, the winners of the last game between the two teams competing in a semi-final has won 44% of semi-finals, which actually gives them less of a chance to win that game. If we look at history at least. The only reliable piece of data is the world rankings, which wasn't available in 91, 95, 99. Oh, but it wasn't available in 1987. Yeah, well, I calculated it myself, didn't I? So, face. So let's look at the first semi-final on Saturday. It's a big one. It's at 9 a.m. in Britain, 10 a.m. in France, 9 p.m. in New Zealand. England versus New Zealand in Yokohama. So, let's look at the ranking. It gives us a pretty good view of who will win the semi-final. New Zealand have a better ranking. They are first in the world. England are second in the world. Well then, let's look at their semi-final records as well. New Zealand have won 4 semi-finals in history, but they have lost 3. England have won 3 and only lost 1. Who did they lose to in 1995? New Zealand. Yes, so good. And let's have a look at their form for the two sides. They've both had 6-match winning runs since losing to close rivals. England to Wales in the warm-ups, New Zealand to Australia in the Rugby Championship. They've only played once since the World Cup in 2015. New Zealand won that one 16 points to 15 at Twickenham last November. Is South Africa versus Wales. Wales are higher ranked, they're 3rd in the world. South Africa are 4th, however, obviously that's very close indeed. Wales, as we saw earlier, have never won a semi-final. They've only been in 2, in 1987 and 2011, both in New Zealand. Wales looking pretty good there in the statistics, and their last game, well, that was in Cardiff last November. They won by 9 points. Very impressive performance, a very comfortable win that was in the end as well. However, they only just squeaked through to the semi-final. They needed France to be down to 14 men and a helpful refereeing decision to give them a 1-point win. Here to comment on that forward pass just before the Welsh try is Frenchman Garcay Garcay.
I'm not going to do the analysis today, all. I'm not going to be the person I'm expected to be anymore. I am not Professor Garcay. Not a doctor. Not a ref. Not coach. Today I am not even Bard Garcay. Not today. I am manic depressive Garcay Garcay. And this is my final form. Unless my promising legal career takes off, which is likely. There has been no more drop goal, lol. And France have been eliminated after a forward pass that was not given. If forwards is now backwards, when does it stop? Will good become evil? Rich become poor? Garcay become Yazrag? Drop goals broke my heart, all. And forward pass scattered the pieces in the wind. You will never hear me talk of rugby again. This is my final thought. Back to the studio. Merci, guys.
Thank you, Manic Depressif Garcay Garcay. That controversial decision, of course, denying us a repeat of the 1995 semi-finals, something that the statistician in me would really love. Now, of course, it is time to make some predictions, but I'm not going to predict the Wales-South Africa game. I'm going to predict that on Saturday. So now I'm only going to predict New Zealand versus England. Heart first, and heart is, of course, going for England. Not only am I English, but also New Zealand, well, they're trying to win their 3rd World Cup in a row, and that simply can't be allowed. They must be destroyed. So I'll go for anyone to beat New Zealand, including my home country. Head, meanwhile, well, England, they've had the best record of anyone in a semi-final. They've won 75% of theirs, only losing once, New Zealand in 95. But I'm clutching at straws there. I just won't tempt fate and say that New Zealand will win. So there's that. And that's the end of the predictions. Head and heart going for England. You can predict too. Just there. Good stuff. There we go then. We will see you on Saturday evening when we will know the winners of England versus New Zealand. We will know who will fill the first quarter-final berth and probably who will be favourites to take the trophy in just over 10 days' time. So until then, bye. Subscribe. More rugby this evening. And latest upload just there. Just there. Hey, Kiddo, fancy a game of catch? Yeet! That made me so scared.